Ever wondered what it would be like to live in a time when there was a rule for absolutely everything? From how to hold your teacup to how to properly flirt with a fan. Well, welcome to the Victorian era, a period so jam-packed with etiquette. It makes today's world look like the Wild West. You think you have social anxiety? Imagine having to consult a rule book before you could even say hello. Today, we're diving deep into the fascinating and, frankly, sometimes hilarious world of Victorian rules to uncover why they had a regulation for literally every single thing. And trust me, it's not just about being prim and proper. It's a story of social climbing, industrial revolution, and a desperate attempt to make sense of a world changing faster than anyone could keep up with. So, let's set the scene. It's the 19th century. Queen Victoria is on the throne, and her reign is long and influential. The British Empire is expanding across the globe, and back home, the Industrial Revolution is in full swing. Cities like London and Manchester are exploding in size. People are pouring in from the countryside, looking for work in the new factories and mills. For the first time in history, you have massive numbers of people from different backgrounds all crammed together. And this created a huge problem, or rather, a huge opportunity, depending on how you look at it. A new social class was rising, the middle class. These weren't the old money aristocrats who inherited their land and titles. These were factory owners, doctors, lawyers, and merchants who made their own fortunes. They had the money, but they didn't have the status. They were the new rich, and they were desperate to prove they belonged. How do you prove you're not just some commoner who got lucky? You act the part. You learn the codes of the upper class. This is where the etiquette explosion begins. Suddenly, hundreds of etiquette books started flying off the shelves. These weren't just gentle suggestions. They were detailed instruction manuals for life. They told you how to dress, how to speak, how to eat, how to walk, how to write a letter, and even how to manage your facial expressions. A popular guide might tell a gentleman that when visiting a lady, he should hold his hat in his left hand, leaving his right hand free for a handshake, and that the visit should last no longer than 15 minutes. Precision was key. These books were the ultimate social climbing toolkit. By mastering these intricate rules, the new middle class could signal to everyone, "Hey, look at me. I know how to behave. I belong in your fancy drawing room." It was a way of creating a new kind of aristocracy. One based not on birth, but on behavior. Let's get into some of the specifics, because this is where it gets really wild. Dining was a minefield. A formal dinner could have a dozen courses, each with its own specific set of cutlery. You had fish, forks, oyster forks, dessert forks, fruit forks. Using the wrong one was a social catastrophe. You were supposed to eat asparagus with your fingers, but only up to a certain point. You couldn't cut your bread roll with a knife. You had to break it with your hands, and God forbid you slurp your soup. It was a performance, a test. Every meal was an audition for social acceptance, and it wasn't just about food. Courtship was a whole other level of complicated. You couldn't just walk up to someone and ask them out. Oh no, the whole process was governed by a strict set of rituals. A young man couldn't speak to a young woman without a formal introduction, and even then, they could only interact under the watchful eye of a chaperone, usually an older, married woman whose job was to prevent any impropriety. A simple conversation was full of hidden meanings. A lady could communicate a whole range of emotions just by how she held her fan. A fan placed near the heart meant you have won, my love. A fan drawn across the forehead meant we are being watched. It was like a secret spy language, all designed to navigate the treacherous waters of love and marriage without causing a scandal. Even the flowers a man sent had specific meanings. This language of flowers meant a red rose declared passionate love, while a yellow carnation signified disdain. One wrong bouquet and you could torpedo your chances. And what about the home? The Victorian home was seen as a sanctuary, a private refuge from the dirty, chaotic world of industry and commerce. The man went out to work in the public sphere, and the woman's domain was the home, the private sphere. She was the angel in the house, responsible for creating a perfect, orderly, and morally upright environment. This led to a whole set of rules for household management. There were rules for cleaning, for decorating, for managing servants, and for entertaining guests. The drawing room, where guests were received, had to be impeccably decorated with heavy curtains, cluttered surfaces, and plenty of trinkets to show off the family's wealth and good taste. Everything was about projecting an image of respectability and moral virtue. So why this obsession with control? Comes back to the massive changes happening in society. The world felt chaotic and uncertain. The Industrial Revolution brought progress, but it also brought pollution, poverty, and social unrest. Cities were crowded and disease was rampant. For many Victorians, especially the middle class, imposing strict rules on their personal lives was a way to create a sense of order and stability in a world that felt like it was spinning out of control. If they couldn't control the smog outside, at least they could control which fork they used for their fish. These rules were a psychological comfort blanket. They provided a clear script for how to behave, which was reassuring in a time when old social structures were breaking down. It was a way of saying, the world might be messy, but in my house, in my life, everything is in its proper place. There was also a powerful moral and religious dimension to all of this. The Victorians were, on the whole, a deeply religious and moralistic society. The evangelical movement was influential, and it emphasized personal piety, hard work, and self-discipline. Bad behavior wasn't just a social faux pas, it was a sign of a weak moral character. Following the rules was a way of demonstrating your virtue. This is also why there was such a strict public-private divide. The public face you presented to the world had to be one of perfect respectability. What happened behind closed doors was another matter, and this led to the famous Victorian hypocrisy. There was a huge gap between the idealized image of society and the often messy reality. Publicly, everyone was a model of propriety. Privately, London had a thriving underbelly that directly contradicted all these prim and proper rules. So, to sum it up, the Victorians had a rule for everything for a few key reasons. First, the rise of a new middle class created a demand for social guidebooks to help them climb the ladder and prove their worth. Second, these rules provided a sense of order and control in a rapidly changing and often chaotic world. And third, a strong moral and religious climate meant that proper behavior was seen as a sign of inner virtue. It was a complex mix of social ambition, psychological anxiety, and moral earnestness. These weren't just silly rules. They were the very fabric that held their society together. A framework they built to navigate one of the most turbulent and transformative periods in human history. It might seem ridiculous to us now, but for the Victorians, it was the only way they knew how to make sense of it all. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this dive into the past interesting, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more journeys into history. Let me know in the comments which Victorian rule you find the most bizarre. See you next time.